Welcome to the Unfair Advantage series, where we explore strategies, insights, and methodologies to give you an unfair advantage. I'm Mona Hilton, CEO of Advantage Anywhere, and we are proud to bring you topics and guests that will stretch your mind and grow your business. Now, if you have missed any of the previous amazing episodes of Unfair Advantage, or maybe you just want to binge watch topics that will improve your business and life, check out the Unfair Advantage recordings at www.advantageanywhere.com/videos. And be sure to get on the notification list of upcoming episodes by emailing info@advantageanywhere.com. Now, I am totally excited about today's topic. It is called Building a Culture of Courage with our special guest, Jay Quinning. Jay is a personal brand and analytics expert. He has years of experience helping clients identify the messages and filter the noise in their marketing, their branding, and marketing analytics. He's even helped me. Now, on a personal note, I met Jay some time ago in our transformational mastermind group. His wisdom and vulnerability really stood out to the point that last week I actually made the statement, Jay, whenever you talk, I learned something. That has been my experience, and I believe that after today, it will be your experience as well. Welcome to the Unfair Advantage, Jay. We're so honored to have you with us today.
What a great intro. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It's all true. So let's dive into courage, because I think that's something that we can all relate to. And just in case you guys haven't noticed, I am learning right alongside you, and I have already learned so much from Jay. But Jay, why do we need courage? Why is it so important? What are we up against?
So I think if we take a look at sort of the world around us, and we take a look at what does it mean to be courageous, there's two ways that the world works. It's either it's shrinking and collapsing over itself in fear, or it's growing and expanding in courage. And so we need courage because living in fear sucks, and living in a fearful society, it's a negative energy, and it's not fun to deal with. The better way is just to be courageous. Courage is the first step at having the life that you want. That's really, it's the foundational principle behind people that are willing and able to take actions to create the life that they want versus afraid and unable and being a victim and having the life that's given to them. That's why we need courage. We need to understand when we're afraid so that we can have the life we want, be the person that we're meant to be, and have the society and the culture that we're looking for.
Yeah, I think that fear is all around us, and it's easy to internalize it. And just speaking for myself, I feel like when I'm fearful, I constrict. It's kind of like a vice that goes around, and then you can't think clearly. You can't make good decisions. You think that it's never going to change. It's very constricting when you're fearful. So that's why courage is such a refreshing concept, I think.
I really agree with you. I loved your picture of the constriction. I've always thought of fear for me as just pressure. It's coming in from all sides, and I'm really trapped. Trapped is another great word for being afraid. There's nowhere for me to go. I'm stuck in a corner. When I was young, I rescued a mouse that I called Meal from a snake. And what ended up happening was that the owner of the snake bought 2 mice to feed the snake. And the snake ate one, but left the other one in the box. And I said, this will not stand. So I got an empty jar and I saved the mouse, whose name was Meal, but it was literally curled in on itself. Like it knew what was happening. It was like, oh, there's a big predator right over there. It just ate my buddy. And I think from that moment, I was like, okay, fear, that won't stand. And so I saved the mouse, and we had it for 4 or 5 years. It was a member of the family.
Oh, wow. You should have called him Lucky.
That's a good one. Lucky is good. I do like Meal.
That was good too.
different side of clever.
So if we can overcome this fear, if we can get out there and live a life of courage, what does it look like? What would my life look like?
I think I want to start with the story of my daughter when I was first introducing her to to being courageous. And she was just growing up, and I live at the bottom of a cul-de-sac. And so from my office, you guys can't see it, but I can see down my street and I can see a neighbor. And so we were out walking one day, and she had met this neighbor, the neighbor's daughter, and they had hit it off and they were having a good time. And we were walking her over when she wanted to play. And so that was sort of the habit. And so one day she came into my office and she said, I want to go play with the neighbor. Can I go play with the neighbor? I said, yeah, you can go play with the neighbor. I'm not going to walk you over there though. And I want you to come over here. And so I showed her, I said, hey, so here's my road, and you can see the driveway, you can see the neighbor's house. I said, I'm going to be able to see you the whole way down here as you're going to your neighbor. And I said, you have to go. I'm giving you permission. And so as I watched this little person basically walk up to the edge of the driveway and kind of lean over into the street, just like never really got like completely at the edge, completely at the frontier of everything that she knew and was comfortable with, lean over, look down the street, kind of a little bit tense about what was happening, and then gradually just take the first steps. And she was walking down the road and kind of looking back, and I was just kind of waving at her from my office window and like, yeah, you can do it, keep going. And she had this great experience, and she was at the edge of her fear and stepped out and did it. And I think there's a really good distinction to make here about what does living a life of courage look like. There's people that don't have a direction, don't have what they want, and they're constantly doing things, right? They might be acting courageously because they're afraid, but if they have no direction, we have a term for that. And for those people, they're foolhardy or they're fools. They're just constantly acting out. They have no direction. Whereas if you take, on the simple example of my daughter wanting to go play with the neighbor, she had a direction that she wanted to go. She had a frontier, something that was fearful, that was holding her back. And by walking through that and walking into that brush, into the forest, the frontier, and getting what she wanted, we would say that's courageous. So what does it look like when you're courageous? It looks like to other people that you're put together, that you have direction, that you're magnetic. If you think about people in your life that are living courageously, that have a mission, something that they want to accomplish, and you just look at them, you're like, man, that person has great energy, or, oh, that person really knows what they want, or, just similar kind of expressions. We're naturally drawn to people that are living beyond fear, that are wrestling with life. One of my favorite expressions about life is that life is literally a bunch of horses running by, and you have to grab the reins and hold on. That's what life is. And if you can condition yourself through acting courageously to grabbing that horse, getting on the horse and going for the ride, right? You'll be at the forefront. You'll be seen as a natural leader. That's what that magnetism, that's what that energy looks like, leading from the front.
Yeah, that's really good. Do you think that children are naturally more courageous and life tends to put fear in them? What are your thoughts?
There's, on the fear side, I think that there's some evolutionary elements in there that keep them close to home and keep them safe and protected. And I think that we understand that there are survival mechanisms that respond to danger. One of my favorite personalities, and he came out recently within the past couple of years and said this, is understand there's a very real difference between danger, which we talk about with kids. It's very dangerous for a kid to leave the house on their own. Nobody would ever expect a 3-year-old to go walking around the block by themselves. Nobody would ever expect that, right? That's a very dangerous activity. And being afraid is in your mind. Danger is real. Oh. So I think that when we're thinking about kids, when we're teaching them to be courageous, we're defining for them that difference. You're old, like what's a common thing you say as a parent? You're old enough to do this now. If you're a son and you have a father and your father gives you a knife, you have the responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. That's the common coming of age issue with men. Well, with young boys, right? They develop strength, right? So they have to have that call to action. So I think it's really funny because we see kids as being more courageous when really the practice is that we're giving them a solid foundation of both safety and courage. Because that's the other trick is that while danger is physically real and fear is in your mind doesn't know the difference. Oh. Everything that's real in your mind is real everywhere. So that's why, we talked about earlier, if you have this constant society and constant individuals that just live in fear, they never know the difference between what's fake in here and what's real. Your mind has it's very difficult for you to understand the difference.
That's really good. I've never thought of that before. The difference between danger being real and fear being imaginary. That good stuff.
An interesting statistic on this one that kind of combines the two. People are more afraid of speaking in public than being these three dangerous activities: being burned alive, eaten by a shark, or drowning. More afraid of public speaking, which is all in your head. There's no danger. Like, there's no danger in public speaking. You get up in front, you give a presentation, there's no danger. You are not in danger, right? Especially in a professional setting versus the fear of it. And people would rather be in a dangerous situation than in that fearful situation. That's how powerful your mind is.
I still think that if you do public speaking and you do a really bad job, your fear is that they will burn you alive.
that might be true. That might be true. And I'm sure that they think about that all the time.
Well, there is so much that's in our head, and I've been studying a lot about that lately, and I'm starting to realize that that does affect everything around you, your reaction to everything, and it's just an interesting study. Speaking of which, I want to kind of ask you about the imposter syndrome, and I know you have some unique perspective on that. I'd love the audience to hear your ideas.
So there's two. We're going to start with a real situation, and we'll talk about what I believe imposter syndrome really is. So there's being an imposter, so being inauthentic, not acting like yourself, right? That's very real. That's a real thing. And it comes out as inauthentic. It comes out as insincere. And everybody can see when somebody's acting, right? So that's being an imposter. That is very different than imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is, and it's very common when people are either in a new position or they're running a company or they're trying on something new. When you're in a situation where you're doing something new, something that you've never done before, imposter syndrome dictates that you feel like you're not doing it correctly, that you could be doing better, or that there are opportunities of improvement. The real question to ask is, if it's a new thing, how could you not feel that way? If you're at the edge of your growth and you're trying on something new and you're going through these activities that you've never accomplished before and you have no experience in, you can't help but have that. You can't help but have imposter syndrome. So I believe imposter syndrome is this great signal that your spirit, your brain, whatever is telling you that you're growing, and it's where you want to hang out. Kind of want to constantly be growing and trying on new things and being new people and developing new skills and meeting new people and putting yourself in new situations. And if you feel like you're an imposter in them, that's exactly how you should feel, because you're growing as a person. If we take that one step further, right? The barrier that's between you and any of these new experiences, the barrier between acting, being on that edge of that frontier, is fear. That's the thing that's stopping you, right? So by acknowledging that you have imposter syndrome, but acting and doing it anyways is passive courage. You're just acknowledging, I don't know if I'm doing it right. Oh, I have imposter syndrome. Oh, I'm an imposter. I'm not doing it right. Good, keep going. Good, keep going. You're being courageous now. Keep going. You're growing. You're becoming a better person. You're developing a new skill. You're taking on more responsibility. You're exactly where you should be. That's what imposter syndrome is for me.
I love that. And it's such a revelation to me that feeling that way is very natural. And it is different from being inauthentic or fake. Like you said, it's the definition of courage to push through that. So, speaking of courage or developing courage, what are your thoughts, Jay, on how to develop courage? How do you go about doing that on a personal level?
Got it. I like to think about things in steps. So what's the very first thing? When I was young and growing up, there was this great t-shirt company, and it was this little Chihuahua, and it was always in a very aggressive tone, doing things kind of like more of a boys extreme sports shirt. And it was KNOW, no fear, right? The NO was really big, but it was KNOW, no fear. And I was like, Mom, this doesn't make any sense. It's not spelled correctly. Why would you know fear? And the discussion we had was that if you're not afraid, you can't act courageously. If you don't know KNOW, fear, there's no courageous action. So that knowledge is step one. That awareness, that first step to developing courage, is being aware that you are afraid, right? We're getting into a little bit of meta thinking skills, but if in a moment when you're doing something and you feel fear, take a moment and breathe, like take a moment and pause, write it down if you can. I feel afraid. And then write down why you feel afraid. right? Just being aware of the fear and that you have that fear there will allow you to take a step in the next direction. So that awareness is a critical step one, right? So step two is, and I really like to ground this in a physical principle. Okay. So if you're at the base of a mountain and at the top of the mountain, there's something that you really, really want, right? It could be, let's do something silly. Like it's a car and you really want this expensive car. But in order to have the expensive car, that car is say 4 times your annual salary. Okay. So in order to get that car, you have to increase your value in the market. You have to get a new job, right? You either have to get a new job or you have to found a company. You have to increase your income in some way. You can say, oh my goodness, how am I going to get to the point where I 10x my salary? You can have that conversation with yourself, which is really, really huge, right? Or you could say, well, what's the next step? What's the first step up the mountain? Rather than taking a leap like Superman would to the top of the mountain, what's the step that's in front of you? How we execute on this in the real world, as I love using physical workouts as the great example of developing the muscle, right? You don't go from deadlifting 0 to deadlifting 300 pounds. You don't do that in a day. You take small incremental steps consistently over time, right? You might start by deadlifting 40 pounds, then 60 pounds, and you kind of increment over time. And then if you have a good trainer, they'll challenge you sometimes and they'll say, okay, well, we're going to do a soft lift right now of 100 pounds. I'm using the story because I'm doing this right now. My goal is to deadlift my body weight, which is 200, right? And this was 4 months ago. And so my record right now is 165 and we're incrementing that weight as we go. And so the next time we do this deadlift exercise, I'll probably be 180 because I'm strengthening as we go, right? So that's the analogy. That's the step 2 is incremental steps. There's the massive action you can take is just being aware of it, that's a great step 1. If the best you can absolutely do is take 1 step forward, that's step 2. That's how you develop courage. And it's simple. Most people understand it. Simple, not easy. Developing courage is simple, not easy. What's the next best thing you can do? This leads naturally into the next point is knowing what your limits are. When I was young, I used to do this summer camp for kids. I specialize in middle school through high school, and it was personal development and leadership training and stuff like that. One of the core activities that we did was a ropes course. And so I was up there helping these people physically put themselves in dangerous, air quotes, dangerous situations, jumping off of a tree, falling backwards into the hands of their colleagues, right? These activities that are considered dangerous, but helping people work through their fear of what was going on. Like when you're jumping from a tree, it's not a free jump. You have a harness and there's belay line. And so we're going to catch you. We want you to drop about a foot because we want you to be at that edge, that frontier of that fear and push yourself through it anyways. So the idea there being is that if you're never aware of your limits, if you're never confronted with them, you just can never really know what you're capable of.
So how does that tie into when you hit adversity, when you have adversity? Where does courage come into play there?
Really great. Perfect next step. This would be like step 10. Okay, so step 10. So I was listening, my pastor recently told this great story and I loved it. We were talking about Genesis and original sin and what was going on there. We were discussing sin in general, right? Sin, iniquity, all the terms for it. And one of the big acknowledgements was that it's not an event. So sin is not really an event. It's the nature of us, right? That's why we need the saving. Because of the way that it works, and because you're either growing, becoming better, or you're shrinking and fearful and becoming worse, if every time there's a great gale wind, and this is my pastor's analogy, if every time there's this great wind, this hurricane, and every time there's this gust of wind, you lay down on the ground, you're never going to know how long you can stand up in the wind. Mm-hmm. The wind is adversity. Life is full of adversity, right? A lot of people think, we used the analogy earlier on about life is like you're standing in front of all these horses that are running by and you got to grab the reins. A lot of people think like, oh, I just won't grab the reins, I'll have a great life. Like, no, that's the worst kind of adversity, the adversity of doing nothing. You're not even playing the game. You're not even in life at that stage. So until you've stood up for as long as you can in adversity, you never really know what your limits are. You never know what you're capable of. You never know what your limits to your courage are. Laying down when the wind is blowing is the definition of quitting. And quitting is the worst kind of fear because you're not even playing the game, right? It is a conscious choice to move backwards. It's not like I'm not getting better, therefore I'm not even trying. It's literally like, I don't want to play this game. I don't want to see how far I can go. Adversity is a really, really great tool to test your limits, because the truth about courage is that the things that were courageous, and think about this, think about the story with my daughter. Walking to the end of the street was very courageous for her 4 years ago. Today, nothing. It compounds, right? Your courage compounds, and the things that were courageous for you last week, they're not going to be the same. It's not going to take the same level of courage for you to do this week, because you're lifting the weights of courage and you're developing and growing and increasing your capacity. So that's what adversity is. That's the importance of adversity. Adversity is a consistent state of work, and you have to constantly push against adversity to know what you're capable of.
Wow, that's really good. I think about what a tragedy it is to never really find out what you could have if you'd have actually tried. And like you said, it's natural to just want to hide or avoid from adversity because it's painful or it's fearful or whatever. And yet the real tragedy is hiding, not dealing with it.
You just described regret.
Regret. Yes.
You just described regret. That is the byproduct. That is the result of fear, is regret.
Yeah. Well, we don't want that, Jay.
We don't.
That's not what we were put on this earth for. So we've up until now been talking about personal courage. And that's a great foundation because we have to have that. But let's talk a little bit about how you build a culture of courage. If you're running a team or running an organization or running any kind of group.
One of the core principles to leading a courageous team is leading from the front. Right? Never asking your team to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. Right? So if you're, I always like this from a sales leader. A lot of sales leaders are taking calls, or they might be managing bigger accounts. Right? They have more responsibility because they're leading from the front. And so with all the examples that we talked about so far, if you yourself are constantly learning and growing, and you yourself are taking courageous action, and you yourself are facing adversity, you're more able to encourage other people in your team and in your culture to do the exact same thing. And by that, I mean acting courageously, facing adversity, learning and growing, right? All those things take a lot of courage. That's really the really, if you're leading, that's the foundation. That's the foundation of leading the courageous team. So there's another principle here is about making sure that we're managing the two different kinds of personalities that show up in business, right? And so this is your extroverts and your introverts. Now, your extroverts, rather, they are naturally courageous. They're naturally putting themselves out there. They're naturally going out there and meeting people and doing that thing. So it's very natural of leaders to reward that activity. What commonly happens is your introverts get left behind. So we talked about daily activity. If you're in tech, there's this really great tool that you can use to develop courage in everybody around you. And I say tech because that's my background, but this is an effective tool no matter what business you run, no matter how it goes. And that's yourself a daily stand-up. Let's take a picture of things that people are afraid of, and then the activity that the daily stand-up forces people to do. People are more afraid of public speaking than drowning, burning alive, or being eaten by a shark. Your daily stand-up is an activity where you tell everybody in your team what you did yesterday and what you plan to do today. So how does this relate to courage? Well, you're having everybody stand up in front of the entire team, public speaking, the thing that everybody's afraid of, and they're public speaking in front of their team every single day. So they're lifting that weight of courage. So you're naturally encouraging your introverts and the people that aren't necessarily used to sharing what they're working on and sharing their ideas. The byproduct of this open culture, of this communicative culture, is that people start to share more and they start to get more creative with each other, and they're sharing more ideas and they're communicating more effectively, and they're becoming more and more courageous. And the great thing about it is that this practice, it's completely subliminal. They don't even know that they're becoming more courageous. They're just naturally building that muscle of sharing what they're thinking about.
So Jay, I can attest to that firsthand. In our company, about a year or so ago, maybe a little bit longer, we started doing those. So right now we're doing them virtually, and we do them every morning. And in the beginning, everybody would call in sick because I didn't want to have to be put on the spot or have to come up with things. And now I can't get them to stop. Can't get them to stop talking. So it's true. I've seen it firsthand. Whereas some of the people who are naturally more quiet, they're not ones who are outgoing or what have you, they've started to just relax, and you're right, it's building a muscle. So I can attest to that firsthand.
For the great byproduct of this is that for people that are naturally more speakers, they're learning how to listen too, right? So we're teaching we're basically taking a traditional introverted skill, teaching the extroverts it, and then teaching a traditional extroverted skill and teaching the introverts it.
That's
right?
genius.
So it's a simple, very simple tool. It's just like taking that first step, right? So what other principles? Well, one really big principle to leading a courageous team is how you receive feedback. And so we talked about, okay, we have this leading from the front. Now we have this activity that we can do to encourage people to share. Well, now they're sharing, right? So now your team is sharing, now they're getting creative. So you might have situations where they're on vision, on point, and there's situations where they're off vision and off point. All right. So let's suppose you're developing a software and you have two core modules. You have a sales process module and an email module. Okay. So if one of your persons is like, if you're working on in your quarter, you're working on developing the sales module for a new client, or you just want to expand the feature set, you might have somebody say, hey, I have this really cool idea for the email module. And this is the feedback for it. This is the tech spec, or this is the one pager, or whatever it happens to be. What you want to do as a leader is be very consistent. You want to treat both the feedback on vision and off vision in the same way. So a simple tool is just saying, okay, I like the idea. Give me some time to think about it. And then you follow up afterwards. So for instance, in the situation where they're off vision, you would follow up and say, you know what? I really liked your idea on the email module because that was off vision. That's a really great idea. We're going to take these notes and we're going to put those in our backlog or our idea repository or in our feedback session. We're going to make sure it's documented. But right now, we really need to be focused on the module we are working for, the vision module. That is, right, that's going to be the sales process piece. So we've had a difficult conversation, but we've received the feedback and we've made them feel listened to. One thing that is critical when you do this, because this is very common, is that we forget and we don't refer back to it. So it's very critical when you want somebody to feel seen and heard, that number one, you have that consistency, but number two, that you are in integrity and you do what you say. You've made a commitment with your word. You're speaking powerfully out of courage, because it's not, a lot of people think it's really easy for leaders to correct these behaviors. It's the same muscle. Somebody at first had to learn to say, no, that's not the direction that we're going, very succinctly, right? So somebody had to learn that muscle. It's just as courageous for that leader to say, we're not doing that, and keep things on track. But going back to the feedback piece, you've gotten the feedback, you've written down. The most important thing you can do to keep the courageous team going, keep the communication, keep the ideas flowing, is to make sure that you return back to it. So in the next quarter, if you're working on the email module, you go back to that employee and say, hey, you had this idea a couple months ago that we talked about. I asked you to put it in the backlog. Why don't you have it on my desk tomorrow morning?
Talk about building credibility as a leader too.
Mm-hmm.
Then they know that they can trust you. And everybody, we can all look back on our own lives and think of the time that somebody said that and not come back. It's a painful memory sometimes.
The byproduct of that is literally that employee will not share their idea next time.
Right. Ooh.
Or they'll think you're full of it. So
right.
So by not following up and not being in integrity, you compromise your ability to lead these people, because they're always going to be thinking, are they going to do what they said they're going to do? And so that's a very, to paint it very directly, not following up is a very cowardly act, right? Not being organized, not taking care of your people. Mm-hmm. So, and coward, opposite of courage.
So you've kind of touched on the idea of challenging conversations. And I'll just be honest with you, that's something that does take a lot of courage, and it's very scary to have those challenging conversations. What's your take on that?
I like to think of things in principles for these elements, but there's a famous idiom. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So when you know there's going to be a challenging conversation coming up, it's worth your time and investments to prepare for that. And the three principles for that preparation are who, what, and then how. Knowing who you're speaking to, knowing what you need to communicate, and then how you're going to communicate that. one of the models I like to use for this is there are buyer personalities. There's 4 types of buyer personalities. And those 4 personalities are analytical, collaborative, direct, and expressive. So your analytical person, they think more in numbers, right? So I love this. It's a really great example. Because a lot of people want to replace something in their office. Maybe the coffee machine needs to be replaced, or the water fountain, or they want a renovation on a thing, or the new printer. So if you're the person making the decision is an analytical person, and a lot of people that are doing operations, something like that, they think in numbers and they think in this way, you can say, okay, using this old coffee machine, it takes 1 minute per person to make a cup of coffee. So we have an office of 200 people, and 150 people every day have a cup of coffee. So if we keep this old coffee machine, that's going to be 150 people times 1 minute a day, 150 minutes of wasted time getting a cup of coffee. If we get this new coffee machine, and that coffee machine, it takes 10 seconds to get a cup of coffee, we've saved 50 seconds per person. So if we multiply it out, I can't do that math in my head, but if we multiply it out, it's 10 seconds times 150 versus 1 minute times 150. So when you're speaking to an analytical buyer, so a personality of somebody that thinks in numbers, if you present the facts and the numbers appropriately, then you're speaking in their language, right? So now we've done a who, what, we want a new coffee machine, how, they're analytical, right? So let's take the next example. So your collaborative person. So your collaborative person wants to make sure that there's no ruffled feathers, that nobody's going to be put out. They're really concerned with the overall team and the well-being of everybody. So I had this great, we recently had my grandma-in-law, we had to move her into assisted living. And she was a collaborative person. So she really wanted to make sure that everybody around her, that her son was taken care of, that she wasn't being put out by her daughters, and that everything could be afforded, and it wasn't going to, she was concerned that she was going to, put a burden on the nurses that were working at the assisted living place. And so when we were speaking with her about this, it was really just about, your son's going to be okay. Your daughter agrees with us. They think this is a really great move. Your nurses are here to serve you. They're not being put out. It's not a burden. We really feel this is a great place. And not only that, but we're going to be able to visit. We have all this structure, and you're going to have all of these colleagues and all benefits, and everything's going to be okay. Everybody's going to be okay. And so we were able to communicate effectively with the collaborative person. We got her into assisted living, right? And she had a great quality of life for the remainder of her days. So that's your collaborative person, right? So that's the who, right? Collaborative, need to live in assisted living. How, we make sure that we communicate that everybody around them and that they are going to be okay, that we're not going to ruffle feathers, right? Or that there's an improvement, right? So sorry, that's the other piece of it, that you can communicate there's an improvement to a collaborative person. Not only is it not going to get worse, it's going to get better. Like that's a good thing for collaborative people. You're a direct communicator. These people, they're no nonsense. They don't want fluff. They don't want stories. They want nothing. They just want the feedback right now, and they just want to get it done. So an example that I use from my life is, as I've been on a journey myself, and I used to get loud, right? And I used to get really boisterous and stuff like that. So my wife one day turned to me and she says, "You get loud at the dinner table. I would like you to think about why you get loud at the dinner table. Because I think if you thought about it, it probably wouldn't be appropriate all the time for you to get loud in this situation at the dinner table." I was like, okay. So, right. So I'm not always a direct buyer, but I receive the direct feedback. And if you know people like this, there are no nonsense in your life. I do like direct feedback. That's the thing. I'm not a direct buyer, but I like direct feedback. Don't tell me a story. The worst way you can give feedback to me is to say like, "Oh, I really hate to say this," or "I know it can be really hard." It's like, you don't know what's hard and easy in my life. Just give me the feedback. Right? Like, just stop it. Stop that.
I can relate.
So I am not collaborative. So getting that right, who, the person you're trying to communicate a difficult message to, because I'm sure that for my wife, she was stepping out encouraged, right? I'm sure that she was like, "Oh, is he going to get mad? Is he going to be receptive to this?" It's constant. This is the constant state that we're in. Is the person that we're communicating to going to be well receiving of the message? And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I get loud at the dinner table. Let's not get loud at the dinner table. Let's see how that works. I'm a lot less angry in my life." So that's your direct communicator. The next one is your expressive person. So this person wants to make sure that, so this person is really, really concerned with being authentic and being able to communicate effectively. So you want to make sure for your expressive person that buyer type, that it matches that style. So for instance, if it's a sales proposal, you're going to want to make sure that they can maintain the branding, right? They have control of the branding and the expression of the message and the words on the things, especially if you have some sort of partnership going on, right? Your expressive buyer, they want to make sure that they can control the communication out there, right? Because they're expressing themselves through visuals or through words. Another way is we've talked about our extroverts. A lot of extroverts are naturally an expressive type. They want to make sure they can still give feedback. So if you have that meeting situation and you have a person that really dominates the conversation, the feedback you can give to that person is to say, hey, we're a team here. You have really great ideas. So when you give an idea, make sure that we're creating space for everybody else, because we value yours. But part of, and this is what I always like to say to expressive people, is that a big part of creativity is when you submit an idea, the next person riffs on that and they make it better. So if we're stifling the expression of other people in the meeting, right, which is natural for an expressive person to do, and they do it, it's not on purpose, it's usually on accident, it's just kind of their personality, that the final idea that comes out is worse than if it went around the table and was improved upon. And so we kind of just communicate that, like, hey, I still want you to share your idea, but we're going to have other people share it at the same time. And that's a very challenging conversation to have with an expressive person, right? That's really the big way to deliver is to really get to know the people that you have to communicate with and that you want to communicate with them, right? It's a privilege to be able to have these challenging conversations with people. Because remember, a challenging conversation takes courage. So you're helping you by developing a courageous muscle. You're helping them because they're going to be able to grow and improve. You're giving them some self-awareness and they're going to be able to improve, be a better part of your team that you're building, this courageous team. Right? So knowing a little bit about folks. And the final step, the final principle when you're having a challenging conversation is you speak to their potential. You don't speak to who they are right now. Don't speak to the activity. The person you're speaking to is who they could become. And if you speak to who they could become, if you speak to their best self, they'll feel that and they'll be much more receptive to the conversation.
Wow, that works with children too.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I was just going to say, I'm hearing a common theme here. I'm hearing a focus on other people as it relates to our courage. Yeah. And I've heard you say that real courageous living is focusing on others.
Most people in life default to what's in it for me. Witham syndrome. What's in it for me? If you can change this, and I am gratuitously stealing this from a very dear friend of mine, Justin Brudeau. If you can walk into a room and instead of say, here I am, if you can walk into the room and say, there you are, and serve them, you'll fundamentally change the way that you're living life. Now, it takes a tremendous amount of courage, of that awareness step of knowing in a situation that you are acting in fear of what's in it for me. How can I preserve myself? How can I maintain my energy? How can I be on top? How can I have my status? How can I keep making money, whatever happens to be, and what's in it for me, right? It takes a tremendous amount of awareness and courage to say, oh, that's how I'm acting. I'm going to shift and take one step and shift to focusing on other people. And this is really when you can always feel this. We talked about what is it like to live a courageous life. You can always feel this in other people when they're service-based, because when you talk to them, they're 100% focused on you. This is almost a universal trait of people that are serving everybody else at a very deep and high level. You talk to anybody that's running a charity that has a really big, solid, huge purpose in their life, and you talk to them about whatever it happens to be, they will be 100% focused on you because they're focused on serving. So for this conversation of being a courageous person, right, and focusing on other people, think about how you feel, right? Think about how you feel when somebody is 100% focused on you, right? How great that feels, how taken care of, how loved, right? How that really feels, and how when people are really focused on you and your needs, that you're able to take those steps, right? Yes, my daughter did a lot of the work herself when she walked over to the neighbors, but it was also me saying, you can do this. You can walk to the end of the driveway. You can walk to the neighbors. I'm giving you permission to do this. That I was calling into being who I knew she was going to become, because she's not going to live in the driveway in our house forever. She has to learn how to step out into the frontier and confront that and be courageous. So as a parent, it's an act of service to my child, right? To be focused on her and her potential and who she can be. That's the key to a service-based life. There is a caveat. This is, you have to develop another courageous skill of knowing what to say yes to and knowing what to say no to. A lot of people think that if you live a service-based life, that you have to say yes to everything. And that's simply not true, right? The higher your mission, the higher your courage, the more you're going to say no. And even saying no is a small thing that builds a very significant muscle for you.
Wow, that's really good. Like I said, every time you talk, I learn. I'm soaking it in. We've covered a lot of ground today, Jay. And if there was one takeaway, if there's one thing that you wanted to make sure that our audience learned today, what would that be?
If I had a billboard and I could communicate this to everybody, I would say you can have, be, and do everything that you want in life if you have the courage to take consistent daily steps in the direction of what you want. That's what I would say. We have a lot of, just from this conversation, right? That magnetic person, the person that is service-based, that thinks about how they communicate to other people, that is aware of the things that they're afraid of and steps out and encourage anyways. Most people don't have, they don't have the things they want. They aren't the person that they want to be, and they don't do the things that they want to do because they don't take consistent daily actions in that way. It's not about looking at the top of the mountain. It's about looking at what's in front of you and what you can do right now.
And for me, consistency stands out there.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day. If you improve yourself by 1%, for our analytical folks, if you improve yourself by 1% every day, at the end of the year, you're 365% better than you were at the beginning of the year.
Wow. So I ran across this quote today and I wanted to share it with the audience because I just love it. It's by Eleanor Roosevelt. And she says, do the one thing every day that scares you. Those small things that make us uncomfortable help us build courage to do the work we do.
Mm-hmm. Very courageous woman and remarkable.
Yes, very much. Well, Jay, I just don't have words except for thank you. This is so good. And if you guys have enjoyed today and maybe you want to go further to explore your own personal brand with Jay, Jay is offering a free video course on personal branding. The link to get that free course is on the screen. If you don't have it or you want to get it, you can always reach out to Jay or myself, and we'll be happy to send it to you. I encourage you to take Jay up on this course. It will be a great treat for you, especially if you liked what you heard today. Jay, is there anything you want to say about this course?
Personal branding has a tremendous benefit to not only yourself, the message you want to get out there, but also to your business. One of the big fears that we talked about was that fear of public speaking and getting out there. And personal branding is a consistent building of that muscle, that courageous muscle to get your message out there and be that person that you want to be and have that message share that you want to share. That's what we do at Brand Builders Group, is that we work with folks just like you that have a message out there that they want to share. This is the first step to that, the first step on that journey from obscurity to having a rock solid reputation. And we're absolutely inviting you at Brand Builders Group to go through with that.
So grab that link. It's on the screen right now. And I just want to thank you so much for being a great guest, Jay. For those of you who are listening or watching, if you would like to get in contact with Jay, reach out to Jay. His contact information is on the screen, his LinkedIn. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you found it as personally rewarding as I did. And I told you that Jay, every time he speaks, I learn something. So enjoy, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Unfair Advantage. Have a great day.